What's going on, everybody? Kalipis Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A14 and the Samsung Galaxy A13. Keep in mind, these are the 4G versions of each phone, and the A14 5G and the A13 5G are completely different devices. Now, if you do end up wanting to learn more about either phone individually, be sure to check out the description, where I will be linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Samsung Galaxy A14, we're getting a 6.6-inch PLS LCD display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 400, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. With the A13, we're also getting a 6.6-inch PLS LCD display with the 1080p resolution, a PPI of 400, and a 20:9 aspect ratio as well. So clearly here the phones do have pretty much the same display, and for what they are, I do think they are really good. At 6.6 inches, these displays are decently large, and with 1080p resolutions, we're getting nice crisp images, so if you're going to be on your phone a bit more, especially consuming a lot of content like videos for example, where the image quality is a bit more important, either phone here will be a great choice. For storage, with the A14, this version of the phone in my hand at least has 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and the A13 is getting 64GB with microSD card expansion as well. Now, keep in mind, both phones in this video actually are the international versions. I believe the US version of the A13 only has 32, and with the A14, I'm guessing it's gonna have either 32 or 64. I don't think this phone has quite reached the US yet, but I imagine it will probably by the time you're watching this. But either way, one thing's for sure, it's not gonna have 128, so on one hand, keep in mind if you really want that much storage in this phone, you can get it factory unlocked and get the international version that does, but at the same time, I feel like at that price, it's probably not going to be worth it, but regardless, I am expecting the A14 to have at least 64 at this point, so even if you are in the US, in which case the A13 I believe only has 32, the A14 will still have an advantage. Now for security features, like every Samsung Galaxy A series phone, both phones do have Face Unlock, and they also have fingerprint scanners right here on the power keys. But starting with the A14, let's give them a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the A13. There we go. One more time. And there we go. So as you can see, real fast and responsive. No issues at all. And again, remember, both phones have Face Unlock too. So if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the A14, up front, we got a 13 megapixel selfie camera, then on the back, we got a triple camera setup, with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. With the A13, up front, we got an 8 megapixel selfie camera, then on the back, we got a quad camera setup, with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So in general, these phones have pretty much the same camera features. On one hand, yeah, the A13 has a depth sensing camera, but the A14 doesn't really need one. It's basically just built into the main camera. Samsung has been doing this lately, and in general, it doesn't really make a huge difference, so definitely keep this in mind. But aside from that, both phones have pretty much every camera feature you can typically expect in a non-flagship phone, including an ultra-wide camera and a macro camera, so definitely a nice variety of features here. As far as the photo quality goes, I feel like there's really not a significant difference. As you're about to see, both phones take pretty good pictures for what they are. So in general, if you are looking for a really affordable phone, but you still want to take some nice photos, you're not going to go wrong with either phone here. Now to give you an idea of what they can do, first, here's some pictures taken with the A14. So again, in general, for what it is, I do think this phone does take some real good photos. Sure, if you have really high expectations, maybe you're coming from an older flagship phone like an S10 for example, then in that case, it'll probably be quite a downgrade, but for the average user looking for a more affordable entry-level phone, I do think the camera we're getting here is going to be perfectly fine. And then here's some pictures taken with the A13, same kind of thing. This phone, for what it is, does take really good photos, and between the two I feel like there's not really a huge difference. So if you have the A13 right now for example and you're considering upgrading to the A14 for the camera, then I personally wouldn't. In that case, I would recommend just getting something higher end in general, but overall, again, for what it is, the photo quality here is pretty good. Now for the RAM and processor, with the Samsung Galaxy A14, this phone is getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G80 processor. With the A13, this phone is also getting 4GB of RAM with the Exynos 850 processor. Now between the two, when it comes to overall performance, despite not really being a fast phone per se, the Samsung Galaxy A14 is actually quite a bit faster than the A13, so definitely a nice improvement. Sure, on one hand, again, if you're going to be on your phone all the time doing more demanding activities, neither phone is really going to be great for that. Keep in mind these are really entry-level, sub $200 4G phones, so you can really only expect so much. But at the same time, for more basic activities, while either phone will get the job done for more light, casual use, the A14 is going to give you a nicer, smoother, and overall faster experience. Now for the battery, both phones have 5000 mAh batteries, and they also both support 15-watt fast charging, so definitely great batteries here. With the 5000 mAh battery, you can expect to get some real good battery life and longevity. So if you're in a situation where maybe you're not always around a charger, so you need a phone that's really gonna last all day, either phone will be great for that. And then of course, down the road, as the batteries degrade, which all batteries do, with these phones, you're not gonna notice it nearly as quickly as you would with a smaller battery. So if you like to get one phone and keep it for a longer time without having to replace it, then again, for that, either phone will be a good choice. And with 15-watt fast charging, sure, it's not the absolute best fast charging in the world, but in this price range, it's pretty much the best you're gonna get. And in my experience, the charging speed with these phones is pretty good. For the software, both phones do have Android 13, which is great. And keep in mind, Samsung really has some of the best software support. So with both phones, you can expect to get several other major updates in the future. With the A14, this phone will be getting Android 14, 15, 16, and 17. And the A13 is gonna be getting Android 14, 15, and 16. So on one hand, if you're gonna be keeping your phone for like 4 years, then I guess the A14 will have an advantage. But honestly, I don't know a lot of people who keep their phone for that long, so if you're really just getting one phone and keeping it for a couple years and then replacing it, either phone will be perfectly fine. Now, as far as other features go, unfortunately, neither phone in my hand has NFC, but keep in mind, that doesn't necessarily mean the Samsung Galaxy A14 or the Samsung Galaxy A13 don't have NFC at all, because for some reason Samsung gives some of their versions NFC and some of them don't have it. Now I believe the US version of the A13 does have NFC, so I'm expecting the same for the US version of the A14. But again, these are the global versions here, and they don't have NFC, so if that feature is important to you if you like to use tap and pay, then keep in mind, there are versions of each phone out there that do have NFC, so with whatever version you're getting, definitely check before you actually buy it. But worst case scenario, keep in mind, with the Samsung Galaxy A14, I do know for a fact the A14 5G does have NFC, so if you really want that feature and you don't want to mess around with the different versions of it, you could always get that one instead. Now, taking a look at the overall designs here, they are pretty similar, but I feel like the A14 is, for whatever reason, a bit more bulky. The bezels are pretty similar, but they do look a bit thicker on the A14, and in general, the body is bigger, it has more of a chunky kind of feel, whereas with the A13, I feel like it's a little bit more sleek and kind of feels more compact. But in general, it's not really too different, and overall, for what they are, I do think the designs we're getting with these phones are pretty decent. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? Is the Samsung Galaxy A14 4G really an upgrade from the A13? In general, I feel like it's not really that much different. On one hand, really, I feel like the main difference here is definitely the performance. With the A14, again, this phone is significantly faster. And like I said earlier, sure, on one hand, it's not really fast, but at the same time, if you're gonna be on your phone a decent amount doing more basic activities, you should get a pretty nice experience with this phone, whereas with the A13, I have noticed using this phone, it's honestly a bit on the slower side, so I feel like it's really only good for light occasional use. Aside from that, the A14 is a bit newer, so it's going to get that one extra update, so if you're planning on keeping your phone for a full 4 years or so, this will make a bit of a difference. And it also, I think, has more storage. Now, the storage, again, is kind of weird because there's so many different US and non-US versions of these phones, but again, the phone in my hand does have 128 gigabytes, whereas the A13 only has 64, so that is a difference in and of itself. But again, I feel like the main noticeable difference, regardless of the version you get, is definitely the performance, because the A14 is significantly faster. Now, is it actually worth upgrading? I would personally say no. At this point in 2023, there's so many different options out there that you can easily get something like a Samsung Galaxy A23 5G or an A14 5G or so many other different phones that are not really that much more expensive than an A14, but quite a bit better. But if you have neither phone here and you're really just looking for something a little basic for more casual use, and maybe you're going to be watching videos and taking photos and doing stuff like that, but you don't really need anything super fast with a ton of fancy features, in that case, between the two, I would personally go with the A14, because even though they're really not that much different, and upgrading between the two is definitely not worth it, the A14 is just a tiny bit better. But this concludes my comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A14 and the Samsung Galaxy A13. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Calibus Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.